from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis is shooting down a media report which states that military police at the Mexican border will be armed. A report published on Wednesday by the U.S. magazine Newsweek also claimed that President Donald Trump has authorized the use of lethal force by these troops. But Mattis is denying this. He says Homeland Security never made the request. The Defense Secretary also says military police can only temporarily detain persons at the border if necessary.
President Donald Trump has sent just under 6,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. Their mission?
After almost 40 days, more migrants have arrived to Tijuana with the hope of starting a new life in the United States.
Nearly 40 days and 40 nights after they left their homeland, they arrived at the border city of Tijuana. They walked more than 4,000 kilometers to reach their destination.
When I realized we arrived to the border with Mexico and the U.S., I felt a relief.
Just a couple of steps away from the wall that divides Mexico and the United States, migrants have sought refuge. They've survived a journey that is yet to reach its end.
We are so close to the border, waiting for Trump to grant us permission to pass. We came here to look for a better future for our children, to work and have a new life. There are some people that have been in the city of San Diego for a week now, and desperation is starting to boil.
Crossing the border is crucial to improving the future of all those who they left behind at home.
I came to help my mother, who stayed in Honduras, to work and help her.
Displays of solidarity have been countless. However, the more than 3,000 migrants who now comprise the caravan have also been hard hit by xenophobia.
As we were walking here yesterday, a police officer said, "Get out of here, Hondurans." Then he cursed, but I didn't say anything bad. We are not here to disrespect them.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration insists that U.S. military forces have been deployed in anticipation of what he has described as an invasion.
About 600 Central American migrants have been detained in Mexico's southern state of Chiapas. Immigration officials asked them to present their travel documents at the official port of entry. The group entered Mexico by crossing the Suchiate River at the border with Guatemala. Some 10,000 Central American migrants are expected to gather at Mexico's northern border. Moving on, Chile's Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick will be called upon to answer questions about the police actions in the killing of a young Mapuche man. With 61 votes in favor and 65 against, legislators approved a resolution which would allow questions to be posed to the minister with police oversight. This is to take place during a lower house session on December 11th. The opposition says it hopes this would serve to publicly clarify the police's role in the murder of Mapuche Camilo Catrillanca. And in Guatemala, a former soldier has been sentenced to over 5,000 years in prison for his role in a massacre during the country's civil war. Santos Lopez was a member of a U.S.-trained counterinsurgency force. He was sentenced to 30 years for each of the 171 killings. He received an additional 30 years linked to the killing of a child. And forensic anthropologists are exhuming the remains of more than 200 victims of the genocide of the 80s. The army had buried them under a school in the community of Trinitaria Ixcan.
They are looking for the remains of the first inhabitants of this community. They were wiped out by the army in February 1982.
The remains were left in this area, according to what the witnesses told us. Many of them put in a ditch, and later the ditch was buried under the school.
The few witnesses who survived say that after the massacre, the army threw grenades on them to try to burn the bodies. When that didn't work, they decided to build a primary school on top of the grave to hide evidence.
In this case, they did everything possible to hide the evidence, to the point of leaving no one alive and no record of what was done. And then they built the school over the top. But in spite of all that, the evidence is here.
It's a delicate task for the forensic anthropologists. They have to remove the earth millimeter by millimeter to recover the fragments of bone.
We are only able to recover small fragments. We haven't found a single complete bone. They were burned. And later, when they built the school, we were told they drove heavy machinery over the grave.
It's complex, painstaking work, but some families from nearby communities have gone to the exhumation, hoping to find their relatives who were kidnapped by the army.
At last, we have the satisfaction of seeing some remains. We don't know if they belong to my dad or not, but at least it's something. And many families are in the same situation. They just don't know.
The forensic experts have until December to complete their work. They must finish before the new school year begins.
And still in Guatemala, 13 people have been accused of bribery in connection with an organization headed by the country's former communications minister. This according to the International Commission Against Impunity. The accused face multiple charges, including unlawful association and money laundering. Minister Alejandro Sinibaldi, who is now on the run, allegedly ran the corruption network. Last week, South Africa's biggest trade union, the National Union of Metal Workers, or NUMSA, launched its own political party. It says it is setting up the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in protest at anti-poor and anti-worker conditions. The union has been preparing to launch a party since it came out in opposition to the ruling ANC in 2013. The new party will have an explicitly anti-capitalist program and be based on NUMSA's 300,000 members. And to talk about this, we are joined by NUMSA spokesperson Pacamile Majola. Pacamile, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, could you explain exactly what inspired NUMSA to enter the political arena?
Yes, indeed, and thank you so much for having me on your show. As you correctly put it, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa is a trade union, and NUMSA will continue to be a trade union. But NUMSA felt it was important that it should drive the process for the establishment of a Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, also commonly known as the SRWP. The reason that is because we recognize the fact that even though NUMSA was an integral part of the liberation movement to defeat apartheid. They fought side by side together with the ANC within COSATU to defeat the brutal apartheid racist capitalist system. However, in South Africa, more than 2 decades after that system has been overthrown, the working class majority continue to live in the same conditions that existed even during apartheid. There's more than half the population languishes in poverty, 37% unemployment and growing, extreme inequality. I mean, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world, where the wealth of the entire country is owned by 3 white billionaires. And we recognize, like many other Marxists, that the only way to end those types of conditions is that the system of capitalism must be completely destroyed and replaced by a socialist system.
Now, Pacamile, what sets the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party apart from other leftist parties in South Africa, such as the South African Communist Party and the Economic Freedom Fighters?
Well, one of the key lessons that we've learned as NUMSA, as having worked as part of the ANC alliance, is that it is impossible for the working class to achieve genuine equality and freedom when they make compromises with capital. And our alliance within the ANC was in effect a compromise with capital, because the ANC has been pursuing very, very narrow neoliberal macroeconomic policies, all of which promote, these IMF-based World Bank type of policies, which promote capitalism, which have really, really worsened the conditions of the working class. And even though we were part of that alliance, they simply ignored us. And they used us just to garner votes. And what we find, for example, within the SACP is part of that alliance. In fact, they're in government today. They are part of the decision-making process, which has resulted and deepened the suffering of the working class after apartheid came to an end, because they've compromised their socialist principles. And the EFF, to be frank, has done the same. You know, they are in coalition governments with a very right-wing liberal political party. In South Africa, and what you've seen everywhere else in parts of the world, for example, genuine socialism can only succeed when the working class is fully in charge and fully in control.
Now, Pacamile, really quickly, do you think that maybe what the left in South Africa needs is unity and not more left-wing political movements per se?
Well, I think it is also important that I must stress that it is the right of, first of all, the working class. There are many members of the working class. They do not think with one mind. And I think, just like you have many capitalist parties, you will have many leftist or socialist parties. And I think the test here is that genuine socialists will have to prove their mettle to the working class. We, just like everybody else, will have to prove that we are worthy of being supported by the working class. And I think, the working class should have choices in this regard. And whilst it is true that absolutely we must fight for the unity of the working class, I think at the same time we must acknowledge the fact that members of the working class don't think with one mind, and therefore we should not presume that only one political party can do the work of economic emancipation for the working class.
Yes. Pacamile, thank you so much for your insight and for your time for Telesur English. We have been speaking with Pacamile Majola. She is spokesperson of NUMSA. And with that interview, we'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud, amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. In Bolivia, social organizations are throwing their support behind President Evo Morales and his second-in-command, Álvaro García Linera, as the two seek re-election in next year's national polls.
Bolivian Workers' Union announced its decision following a national assembly.
We want to strengthen the candidacy of Evo Morales. He's the best candidate and leader for the 2019 general elections. We're also throwing our support behind our friend Álvaro García Linera, the vice presidential candidate seeking re-election.
Social organization, campesinos, and indigenous groups, all part of the National Council for Change, wasted little time in demonstrating their support for Morales and his vice president. They're standing in solidarity with the union as they back the government.
We, the campesino movement, have opted to have a political wing so we can't be joined to another political party. That is why the Bolivian Workers' Union also has taken that decision.
García Linera had initially announced that he would not be seeking re-election, but it was President Evo Morales who requested that social organizations ensure that the vice president's decision is reviewed.
It's the decision of the Bolivian Workers' Union. The most important organization of the working class has reached this decision.
Meanwhile, President Morales called on social movements to discuss and come up with ideas that would help to secure the country's political future.
This is going to be historic. I don't believe there's any other country in the world where the worker sector has come together to organize, discuss, evaluate, and come together to participate in democratic elections.
These organizations are a kind of extended social cabinet for the government. General elections will be at the end of next year, but right now the country is immersed in an early electoral campaign for primary elections.
Trade and investment will likely be in focus when Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez makes the first bilateral visit to Cuba by a Spanish leader in 32 years. He will hold talks in Havana with his Cuban counterpart Miguel Díaz-Canel. Sánchez is traveling with a delegation of executives from 24 companies. They are expected to meet representatives of Cuba's private sector and inaugurate a Spanish-Cuban business forum. Several hundred Spanish firms already operate in Cuba, many in the tourism sector. Our correspondent in Havana, Alien Fernandez, has the details of this visit.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is going to visit Cuba. There's a great expectation because this is the first official visit of a Spanish Prime Minister to the island in 32 years. The last time a Spanish Prime Minister visited Cuba was Felipe González in 1986. After that, in 1999, Prime Minister José María Aznar and King Juan Carlos I visited Cuba, but it was not on an official visit, but to participate in an Ibero-American summit. Sánchez will arrive in Cuba in the coming hours, and shortly after he will meet his counterpart, Miguel Díaz-Canel. He is expected to sign commercial agreements with the country. On Friday, Sánchez will participate in a business forum in a Spanish-owned hotel. The Spanish Prime Minister will also walk around the colonial neighborhood of Havana and will take part in a symbolic act to commemorate late Cuban General Antonio Macedo. After that, he will return to Spain. Many people expect that this visit reinforces old economic ties between the two countries. Spain is the third main commercial partner of the island after Venezuela, China, and Europe. Authorities of both countries have said there is a path of growing ties in sectors such as industry and tourism.
We thank Alien Fernandez for that report. To other news now, hundreds of students have rallied in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, to support the government of Nicolás Maduro on Student Day. President Maduro attended the demonstration and led students in a pledge to defend socialism. He asked students to support the revolution, the country's sovereignty and peace.
I want the student movement out in the streets, defending the revolution, defending peace, defending the country against imperialism. I'm asking for the support of the Venezuelan student movement to move ahead with the Homeland 2025 plan in order to govern in peace.
But another group of students clashed with the police during a demonstration against the president on this same day. Protesters marched from the Central University in Caracas, urging Maduro to resign. Peruvian judicial workers have gone on a 48-hour strike to demand higher pay and an increase in their budget.
Administrative and technical workers at the courts will be striking for 2 days to protest. Among them are lawyers with postgraduate degrees who only receive a salary of $360, with no increase in the last 10 years.
This doesn't cover our basic needs, and that affects our work. Constitutional law states that the judicial sector workers in Peru are exclusive.
They're not only asking for higher pay, but an increase in the justice system's budget so they can improve the conditions they work in to provide a better service.
The government must increase this budget so we can organize better and hire more staff. Sadly, there are delays, and this happens because we have too many cases. Sometimes we have to work weekends or extra hours to do what we must.
In the morning, workers marched towards the Palace of Justice to urge the president's support. They were joined by litigation lawyers.
The budget is not enough. We have too much work and our workers can't handle it. As lawyers, we're sorry for this and we think that they can't do more than what they're already doing.
Workers have also called on the government to take action against reported corruption in the judicial sector, involving not only suspended or charged judges, but those who are still working.
The hearing for Panama's former president, Ricardo Martinelli, is set to resume on Thursday after it was suspended due to his ill health. The former president is accused of spying during his tenure, and his sons have been arrested in the U.S. U.S. authorities confirmed that they were accused of bribery in connection with the Odebrecht case. Nearly 2 years after the government and the FARC signed a peace accord, social leaders still continue to be murdered in Colombia. More in this third installation of our series on the accord. Our correspondent in Colombia, Paula Fernandez, provides the details.
November 24, 2016, it's a historic day for all Colombians. It's the day that the peace accord between the FARC and the government was signed, right here at the emblematic Cristóbal Colón Theater.
A continuación se realizará la firma del nuevo acuerdo de paz entre el gobierno de Colombia y la...
The agreement on political participation, the second point of peace talks, was thought to be the most challenging. However, the FARC would eventually become the revolutionary alternative force for the Commons Party. And for the first time, the country saw members of the FARC take seats in the democratically elected Congress.
It's a Congress we have never imagined, not even 8 years ago. And today, it is possible thanks to the end of the conflict with the largest guerrilla group in the country and in the wider continent.
What has the transition from armed struggle to participation in the country's Senate mean for the country and combatants?
It's been a central change in the policies of the country, because fundamentally, the participation of the FARC in the Congress, not only the participation of a political party, has been very important to the history of Colombia, to social sectors in the towns, those in the cities who are traditionally excluded. And to have that voice in the Congress, a voice which is different, an alternative voice, a voice that is familiar with the war, that knows the region, that knows the problems of the country, I think it's really good for the country's democracy.
This is perhaps the most politically significant place in this country. The political participation point of the agreement, new political groups were encouraged to join forces. Regulations would also guarantee that there is an opposition, as well as the safety of different organizations, parties, and independent forces. Meanwhile, the murder of militants of the Patriotic Union Party are also part of the country's complex political history. Hundreds of people disappeared and thousands were killed. Among the victims, the father of José Antequera, one of the leaders of the party.
There is security contrary to what many could think. For instance, FARC has said that they have a better situation than they expected in Congress. However, at the same time, there are cases such as Jesus Santric, one that do not have any guarantees. So far, there is no evidence against him, which could be taken from being a congressperson as it is happening. And also at the same time, FARC members are being killed together with social leaders, murderers.
Colombia's Congress has 280 seats held by members of traditional parties. The peace agreement suggests 16 more. This could require the creation of new peace municipalities to allow people living in areas affected by the armed conflict to exercise their franchise and have broader representation in the Senate. This, however, has not yet materialized. So what does this mean for affected communities and for the victims of the armed conflict?
It's an attack on real peace. Peace did not start when the peace agreement was signed. With this, the Congress is supporting a violation of victims' rights.
2 years after the peace agreement was signed, Colombian people are still waiting to have more political participation. They also demand that systems are put in place that would facilitate wider citizen participation in the political process.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The United Kingdom and the European Union have agreed on a draft political declaration that sets out the terms of the post-Brexit relationship. European Council President Donald Tusk says the EU executive informed it had agreed on the text in principle and that the leaders of the 27 remaining EU states would screen the text later on Thursday at a Brussels meeting. The declaration also states that the transition period could be extended by up to 2 years. That is, until the end of 2022. Prime Minister May is to take an emergency statement in the Parliament. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has warned that his government could veto the Brexit agreement over the Gibraltar dispute. Madrid wants to negotiate directly with London on the future of the contested British territory. So Sánchez is now demanding clarification on the status of Gibraltar in the Brexit draft. Spain maintains its claim to the small colony located in the south of the country, which was ceded to Britain. UK Prime Minister Theresa May is due to sign a treaty with EU leaders to leave the bloc on Sunday. The bodies of 6 slain Malawi soldiers who were killed during peacekeeping operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo arrived home on Wednesday. The soldiers were part of a joint operation against armed groups in the forests of the eastern DR Congo. The deaths mark the biggest loss by the large UN force in the country since the rebels killed 15 troops nearly a year ago. The president is expected to attend the military funeral ceremony scheduled for this Thursday. Former members of Ethiopia's Ogaden National Liberation Front have returned to the country from their base in neighboring Eritrea. The group's spokesperson says they are returning to Ethiopia following the signing of a peace deal with the federal government. After last September's peace talks, the Ethiopian parliament declared a ceasefire and removed the group from the list of terrorist organizations. The former director of the FBI, James Comey, has revealed that House Republicans have subpoenaed him as part of their investigation into the Bureau's actions in the 2016 campaign. And it seems that he was offered a closed-door hearing, which he has rejected for fear of selective leaks and distortion. Former Attorney General Loretta Lynch has also been subpoenaed for a private deposition. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on StarSat, channel 461, and in South Africa, and in channel 539 in Nigeria. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.